Okay. All right. So, kind of an interesting day for us here today as we kind of transition into a little bit kind of like the regular season. We're obviously still in camp mode, so there's things that we're going to work on today that are still Detroit Lions specific. We took time this morning, went through the Houston tape. A lot of good teaching clips out of that. Some good plays on film, some not so good plays on film. We've got to get some of that corrected. But I think it was good, productive meetings this morning. Just finished up with a meeting right now and kind of talked about some different things from a overall football knowledge standpoint, some situational football, some things that we're going to work on today, important parts of the game that are critical, as we go through the game, the halftime, end of the half situations, third down in the red area, some of those, so we'll practice those today. A little bit longer individual periods today, so you guys will see a little bit longer fundamental periods than normal, than what we would do during a regular season. I just think we got to really keep the emphasis on fundamentals. That'll go away quicker than we wanted to when we get to the regular season. So any opportunity we have to stay with fundamental teaching and kind of making sure we have that foundation is critical for us as as we go forward. So that'd be good. Be good to get some more of the guys back out to practice today. So you'll see the guys, some of the guys that necessarily weren't with us last week. So it's good to be home from that standpoint. So Marvin, guys like that will be out there working, like Daniels, things like that. So, that'll be all positive to kind of keep just getting guys back so we can, keep evaluating everybody as we get closer to the season. Other than that, then we're switching gears, getting ready for Buffalo. Kind of making sure we're ready to go there and treating it like a game week from a preparation standpoint, a mental standpoint. It's really a big switch for us from the training camp mode, which is very much so about installations, about individual improvement, things like that. But now we'll start to get into the how do you study an opponent? How do you study film? How do you take game tape and look at cut-ups? How you take cut-ups earlier in the week and broken them down into different situational areas of the game, and then at the end of the week put that back together into game tape with game plan calls and communication and build that overall awareness of how to get ready to play a game. So we'll start that process. It's definitely something that we got to spend time on. You can't just expect everybody that comes in to understand what's expected from a study standpoint every single week. So it's a good opportunity for us to kind of teach that, get a dry run at it as we push forward, get ready for the season.
Just to be really clear, with Daniels and with Jones, so you expect them to actually practice today, or you mean being out there just in general?
Yeah, it's going to be, again, because we've been away here for a little while. So they'll be out there, we'll go through and see how they feel as they progress, and just got to make sure that we're not going to throw them into something where it's going to be, too high a volume too soon.
But they'll be working on a regular basis.
So again, we'll see how it all goes. It's going to be, kind of temperament to however practice is going and how they feel as we go through it.
With some of the slow playing you're doing with those guys and bringing them along, a couple guys that got some healthy reps these two preseason games, Mitchell Lavin and Jonathan Wynn. First glance for us, it looked like they performed pretty well. What did you see from those two on the edge?
Yeah, great observation. Especially with those two guys, I think those are guys that we're trying to really evaluate and see if they can help us as you try to fill out the roster and as many positions as you can to, as you go towards the future and develop and things like that. But I think Mitch has done a really good job, especially recently, of settling down in play style and kind of doing some of the things a little bit more disciplined the way that we want them done. And I think with that, he's found his niche in some of the plays that he's made to have the freedom within the system. It's kind of always the trick a little bit, I think, when you talk about a defensive system that's very structured from how everything works. There are freedoms within it, and I think he's done a good job of really understanding what that means on the defensive front. Jonathan Wynn is, somebody we had some experience with at the end of the season, brought back and has developed in that now with the more reps being back on the field. I think he's taking advantage of those. So two, good young guys that are out there working really hard. We'll see where it goes, but like some of the things that we saw in the game, certainly from the standpoint of the things they did, and they also have a little bit of element of versatility to them, so you'll see them line up in different positions, which is good too.
Yeah, Coach, a question about your running game. Go ahead. A question about your running game. Halfway through the preseason, is it going the way you want? If you just look at the raw numbers, you're averaging 4 something per carry. Just wonder where it stands at this point.
It's a good question. I think it's hard to look at just the numbers because then all right, what were the runs, when did they come, who were they against, and kind of the whole overall picture. But I would say that in the field of just practice and getting better at some of the things that we're doing in the run game, I feel like it is coming along. There'll certainly be a growth period through the course of the season with that, but I think the big part of it for us is with as much mix and match changes that we've had in the interior of the offensive line. That's a big part of it. Not only is that important, like I talk about all the time about this, 5 guys seeing through the same set of eyes in the passing game, it's critically important in the run game too. That's where if you're not on the same page with some of the different looks and the different call-outs, then you have free defensive guys running through, and that's obviously not a good situation. So getting there, we're developing it, we're building it. I'm sure it'll grow once we get to the season. Sometimes those take on totally different looks when you get to the season, depending on the personnel that you have. So we'll see how that goes. But I think the guys are working on it. I know we had one in the back end.
Yeah, how you feel about the linebackers and the quarterbacks? You feel that there's a disconnect when it comes to film, and then the gameplay is short yards, causing the misreading the plays, and then the short yards become long yards? Because it seems like there's a huge breakdown with the quarterbacks and the linebackers.
I don't know. That's nothing that really pops off as far as an issue that I've seen as far as the communication there. I'd say is the way the communication works in most defensive football is the linebackers are kind of tied into the middle, so they communicate very closely with the defensive line, and then the communication kind of goes from the middle and goes out. So then the linebackers will communicate with the safeties, and the safeties really kind of communicate outside to the corners because they're just kind of proximity farther away from that standpoint. So I think in general, if there's breakdowns in the defense, it's usually everybody just not on the same page, or the communication, or something from a coaching standpoint that we got to fix. That could be an inherent maybe scheme issue, or certainly there's plays offensively that give us problems. And when you're in particularly basic defenses, in some situations, some of those problem plays that we see on offense are definitely going to exploit some of the areas that maybe during the season we wouldn't be in if that was the case from those situations. But communication, I would say probably not.
Just following up on what Justin asked about those two edge guys, and kind of on what you just touched on there, sort of the basic defenses. I'm sure you're not rolling out a lot of what we'd see on a game, and so we're getting those 3-man rushes, 4-man rushes, pretty basic up front. So what are you looking for from those pass rushers to sort of see them pop out?
Yeah, I think when you try to do that in game situations, which is really, it's probably everybody in the league does the same thing, and that's why I think we've talked about those joint practices are so valuable, because there's so much more that we're going to do in those practice periods that we're going to test and take a look at, packages, looks, different things like that. But in the game itself, again, because there's such high evaluation reps, that when you limit or take out some of the unusual scheme stuff that we can do, you're really just evaluating that player individually against another opponent, which is what you want to do from that standpoint, and find out what they do well, what they don't do well, and then once you establish what they do well and figure out if they can help you win, then you try to put them in those situations as much as possible and scheme later. But you got to get the evaluation right first.
I know that Sean's still working his way back, but with Daniel's back now and Trey Flowers and Snacks back now, how excited are you or eager are you to get some of those guys back up front, work with them?
Yeah, I'm always excited when guys come back and get out in the field. That's the best part about it, is when we can coach them up on the field and practice and try to improve. So it'll be good. I don't know what it's going to look like when we get everybody out there. We're still kind of grinding through that, but I think it's realistic for us to understand that those guys still have a long way to go. They're still grinding through, coming back, and making sure that we're doing it the right way, so that when they're back on the field, that we don't have any issues going forward from that standpoint. So I think it'll be kind of continually always evolving sort of deal once everybody's kind of back out there from that standpoint. It's interesting, I say to the guys all the time, there's probably one day out of the year that everyone's gonna feel the best. That's the first day of camp, and after that, everyone's always gonna have something that they're dealing with. So you never really have it all the same after that.
Is there something?
Matt, I just want to be clear on Stafford, just because there's been a lot of talk, a lot of conjecture about why he's been out. What, if any, concerns do you have about specifically his back or him coming back from that injury this year?
No, everything for us right now is just going forward. It's kind of just as we try to really take a good look at the season and the off season and everything that he's been doing from that standpoint, and through training camp, to figure out good times to get really good high competition reps, and then know when maybe it would be a good opportunity for somebody else to get good high competition reps, and or have a little bit of a break before everything kicks off at a high level. Because once that happens, there's you can't stop it from that standpoint. And knowing that when we look at the full schedule, not only just training camp but the season, knowing that there's going to be a spot relatively early in our season where the bye week is, and then after that it's a very long stretch for us. We know we have to do the best we can to kind of plan for that long term.
So no concerns, just to be clear about him coming back from the back.
Again, like I said, we're just moving ahead of schedule.
Matt, maybe it doesn't matter all that much, but since you've been on the staff and maybe even going back to when Bob got here, there's been a lot of aesthetic changes around the building, murals up front, some real revamping in the locker room. We got our first look today, saw the Pride of the Lions display. Is any of that stuff important, and I guess how much of a hand do you have in kind of crafting some of that?
Yeah. Good observation. I think it's all important, really, to be honest with you. I think it's all kind of the atmosphere in which these guys work every single day. So we all spend a lot of time in this building, and certainly during the course of the season, I think it's always really important to tie in the history of the game. I think it's important to understand, who was here before you and the path that those guys blazed as everybody progressed. And there's a certain amount of gratitude that we have to all express to those guys that came before. So I think that's really important. I think for us, again, it's just the overall environment that we're working in and making sure that there's, whether it's reminders around the building or constant signs or different things that motivate everybody from that standpoint. We're always trying to come up with new ideas from that. I think, if you go into a building every single day and it's, white wall, brick, and that's all you're looking at all the time, you can wonder, but I think if you're trying to constantly stimulate, the mind or the thought process or kind of the meaning or the culture or whatever is behind it, you're trying to get that out there as much as possible.
Yeah, Matt. I'm curious as far as Ty Johnson. When you look at that running back group, is that his speed give maybe a different component than what else you have there, and is that what maybe attracts you to him and gives him a chance to play?
Sure. I would say certainly his speed is something that is very interesting, and I would say that there's definitely some trends in the league right now where you have guys with different types of speed out there that give defenses problems, and those are hard players to defend. Right now for him, it's just really about learning the position and making sure that that's all consistent. And then once all of that kind of gets settled down, if it goes in the direction that we want it to, then we can kind of try to explore other areas to use his athleticism and things like that to help us certainly. I think he had a couple of really good plays in the game where you see maybe some of the bursts that he had through the line of scrimmage, which was pretty good, and then he just got to learn kind of the next step after that. It was almost like he got through the line of scrimmage too fast, and then it was like, what do we do? And where a lot of those guys have that. Carry on they're all different. They all have different styles, but he has his skill set, which is good. We like it, but we just got to see everything consistent. That's the biggest thing.
I was wondering about Miles Kilbrew. What are some of the biggest differences you've seen from him last year to this year? Somebody you asked to do a lot out there in the field.
Yeah, I think Miles has really grown a lot between last year and this year, especially defensively. I think he really understands what we're doing. It's not perfect by any means, but it's certainly much more aggressive. Once you get comfortable as a defensive player, then you tend to play a little bit more aggressively. You tend to understand there's certain situations where you can take some chances. You can maybe have opportunities to run through the line of scrimmage a little bit more and see some things a little bit quicker. And I think he's really capitalized on those. I think he's had some pretty good plays in the last couple games where he's diagnosed what the offense was doing, saw a situation. Again, the defense is structured, but there's a little bit of freedom within the structure as long as you do it right. So I think he's done a good job of identifying those areas or those plays and made some good decisions with it. So just that's been the biggest change, I would say.
Okay, thank you guys.